Hello everyone, welcome to episode 2 of Passionate About Pedagogy. I am so excited for another episode of this show, and I today would like to talk about listening and listening critically to a singer. And I first want to give a great shout out to this book that I am reading in my vocal pedagogy class, currently working through right now, called Your Voice, The Inside View. It's by a wonderful pedagogue named Scott McCoy. And I am just so excited to be working through this book. And I kind of wanted to bring up some topics that we've been really talking about in class. And one of them is this idea of listening to singers. And I think, no matter if we're a voice teacher or a singer or a fellow singer or just someone in the general public, we listen kind of with a little bit subjective and we use subjectively and sometimes we use subjective language to kind of describe a voice, and so we either like it or we don't, or just as an example, like I have been really, and so I think I've been really listening to a lot of singers, not just classical, not just contemporary, but kind of a little bit of everything. And I, before I read this chapter in this book, and I was very, I knew what I liked and I knew what I didn't like, but I didn't know how to quite describe it. Does anybody have that feeling of wait, I think that they're singing this way nasally maybe, but how could they fix that, or maybe this is something I like in country music, or maybe it's something that wouldn't be appropriate for opera. So I didn't know how to describe what I was hearing personally, and so but then when I read this, and I read this chapter, and I was like, oh wow, I really got some ideas on how to go about this, and one thing that I think is I'm trying to find this quote that I wrote down. One thing that I found that was really interesting was in the book they were listening to, or in the book they had this study where everybody kind of listened and they rated these things on tone quality, like bright or dark, back or forward, vibrato versus straight tone, and so they rated them on this scale. And so one of the really interesting things that I was kind of curious about was they were listening, this panel, and I'm assuming they're classical singers, because I don't know, because it says here that they were unfamiliar with the style. But that is the really interesting thing that I was thinking about, was that one of the comments was that this panel who was rating these singers had a little bit of trouble, or there was a little bit of inconsistencies with some of the ratings, because they were unfamiliar with the commercial style. And I was like, that's so interesting. So it's really, I think you do have to be familiar with a certain style to kind of know what is, I say right, put quote right versus quote wrong. Another interesting thing that I read about in the book was certain people, these people were listening to Pavarotti, and who was a wonderful, wonderful tenor. And so one of the it's so interesting. One of the really interesting things was that and I'd love to explore this topic too, but the male head voice versus the female head voice, like how does a woman's head voice sound different from a guy's head voice? And so on this topic, if you've listened to him sing, Pavarotti sing, it's so powerful. It's just so powerful, and I cannot wait to learn about how that is made, and gosh, it's so amazing. So the common listener, just everyday listener, would think, oh my gosh, he's belting. That's crazy. That's great. So that is so high. And so one of the comments was like, that Scott McCoy was talking about was, he said that a lot of people ask him like if tenors are in pain when singing those high notes because it sounds just so powerful, like, oh my gosh, it's so crazy. And I'm going to quote directly from this. He says, "Remember, there is nothing natural about singing in this manner. It is a style that almost always requires extensive training and practice, and not to mention a healthy dose of native talent. Listening also benefits from training and practice." And I really liked that. I really liked that that statement, because I think that that there's this subjective way that we listen sometimes, and we don't really know what we're saying, or we don't really know like how to say it, in a way that's like, educated and comes across as, you're not going to hurt someone's feelings by saying this. Because I've been in that place where someone's told me something and I've kind of taken it the wrong way. Well, that's not how they meant it. I'm like, oh gosh. And so I think another really interesting question that was brought up in the book was, why do we rarely use like scientific terms when we describe someone singing? And I think that it goes back to that a lot of people like the judges on the TV talent shows, they might not be well versed or well trained in the physiology of the voice, and as I said, it was so interesting that I never even thought about this. Some of them, like who is it, Simon Cowell on American Idol, or the X Factor, or America's Got Talent. He's everywhere. But has he had like voice training? Has he like taken voice lessons or something? That's such an interesting topic. So that's just one of the really interesting things that I found in the book. Because really, listening is really such a subjective thing, and we really have our own opinions. And so I wonder, this is my discussion, I wonder how could we be a little like less biased and use some factual things versus some things like and this is kind of where I wanted to what I was going into next, about some of the TV talent shows. Some of the judges, like I hear on the TV talent shows like America's Got Talent or The Voice or American Idol, I wonder what they are listening for, and like what they're looking for when they are listening to a singer, and it's really interesting because I will hear them say something and then another judge says something completely different, or some of the judges like agree, and especially people like, I know in America's Got Talent, like not all the judges actually sing, so it's so interesting, like how could they, where's their opinion coming from? And so I think that's a really interesting, topic. I think, opinion is an opinion. So how do we decipher that, and how I think do we get singers to is an opinion like based on if they make it or not? I think so. Like I think it's sad. It's like, gosh, if one person doesn't like you, then oh gosh, what a gosh, what do you do? I mean, obviously you keep trying, you keep going for it. The next topic that I had was it also has to do with listening, and I think that this will go back to my classical background and singing and choir. I'm in the advanced ensemble at my college, and I've been in a high school choir, and it's just so fascinating to me. One thing that I would love to explore in this series is not just solo voice, but also how would you sing in a choir, and specifically this past week we did a voice placements in choir, and where does that's kind of like who does your voice quote blend with the best, and should you be singing tenor 1 or tenor 2, or soprano 1 or soprano 2, or should you be singing this solo, or is the solo not right for your voice because your voice just kind of stands out from the choir, or maybe that's a good thing. So it's so interesting that the topic of course solo singing and then choral singing. And one thing that I think that was really interesting that I found, and we talked about this in pedagogy and choir, was where you are in the choir isn't always your fach or voice type. So you could be soprano singing alto in the choir, which I have one of my best friends is doing just that. She is a soprano, wonderful full lyric voice. She's amazing, and she's alto 1, and so I think that's so interesting. So I wanted to give a shout out to all the great choir directors in the world and say, like, what is your technique for voice placement? Like, what do you use to place your choir, and going back to the subjective versus objective thing, like, is it a subjective thing? Like, could one director have you singing bass 1, and then could you be bass 2 in another choir? It's just so interesting. So that is my topic for today, and as always, I hope you have enjoyed this video, and the passion is just growing even more about all these topics, and I cannot wait to talk to you about more topics like this, and I think it's just going to be so much fun and so insightful and so fun. So everyone have a great day, and I will see you next time.